And good morning, Common Sense America. This is Eden Hill. It is Wednesday. It is May the 24th. We have a very special edition here for you today here at Common Sense America. You guys know my love for this country, my love for our families, my love for this nation, my love for our faith and our freedoms. And, I had to just bring over to the show. I am constantly talking about our veterans. I'm constantly talking about our military, those who are serving here in this nation, our active duty, are those who are in the reserves, and those are veterans. And it's just so important to me here at Common Sense America. So I'm going to beat that drum today. And for all of those who were saying, oh, here she goes again. She's so patriotic. Why doesn't she just go hide under a rock? No, I'm not going to be like most of America right now. I'm not going to hide under a rock. I'm here talking about my God, my country, and our families and our freedom. And I'm talking about the fact that we have Memorial Day coming up on Monday. And this month has been month of the military family, month of the military spouse. It is also focusing on Armed Forces Day and then Memorial Day. We have our Naval Academy graduates graduating this week from Annapolis. All of our different service academies have graduates headed into serving this nation for our Department of Defense. And so we have a lot to talk about, whether it is the low recruitment numbers, whether it is Ron DeSantis throwing his hat into the presidential race, and the fact that he is the only one who has served this great nation on both sides of the aisle. That's a huge question I have. And today I'm going to bring over two Vietnam veterans to this show who I am so thankful. Hat tip, Dennis Lowry. Thank you so much for introducing me to these amazing veterans. And I'm excited to really dig in deep with them from their service, what they saw during Vietnam to today, and how they are viewing what is happening right here in front of us. Here in Eastern North Carolina, there's always rumors going around about X, Y, and Z. We have Camp Lejeune in our backyard. We have Cherry Point, F-35s. We have Seymour Johnson, F-16s. Oh, F-16s are on the news with Ukraine. You know that. We also have Fort Bragg, and where my husband was stationed for most of his service. And, I'm going to bring this up, and I brought this up. I'm going to beat the drum again. The last time my husband and I were over at Fort Bragg, yes, the 82nd, home of the 82nd, a lot of them were overseas. But my husband was in just awe shock of the fact that there was nobody around. Yeah, it was a weekend. I get that. But usually weekends are busier because people are at the supermarket, people have to go to the commissary, people have to do their errands. And he said to me, I've never seen this place look so deserted. And I got to thinking, and even back during that time period, this was last summer. So nothing has changed in the sense of our low numbers of recruitment for the United States military. And Jim Zumwalt, who I am just thankful I'm getting to know from so many different standpoints. He wrote in Stars and Stripes a couple weeks ago talking about the recruitment aspects of our military. And so he's going to talk to that and his father and his legendary approach in Vietnam. So you guys, we have a lot to talk about. It is, it's Wednesday morning, it's hump day. And I tell you what, we already had technical difficulty this morning, but that's okay. We are overcomers and we are resilient, and we are all about talking about the big issues of today. And, I just want to also throw out, we're going to be doing a couple new things here at Common Sense America. We have a lot of new things coming down the pike within the next 2 weeks, but we're going to do a rumors corner here at Common Sense America. And rumor has it, those who were elected to office in most recent times here in Carteret and Craven County aren't doing their job. Rumor has it there's a shakeup in Raleigh, and rumor has it we need new leadership. And so this Vietnam Veteran Memorial Day episode is about looking for new leadership at the state and local levels, and also at the highest levels of government in our national defense, and also for our VA administration, because you know what? I'm not seeing too much leadership there either. But that is my 2 cents for today here at Common Sense America. I'm Eden Hill, and we're going to bring over to the show 2 phenomenal gentlemen who've been keeping me laughing this morning before we even came over to the show. And do I say any more about these 2 amazing men? Let me add. Oh, there they are. Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to Common Sense America.
Thank you very much.
So, okay, let me put up the banners here first and foremost. We have Lieutenant Colonel James Zumwalt, retired Marine infantry officer who served in Vietnam, the 1999 intervention into Panama and Desert Storm, who is on the bottom part. And then on the top right, we have Stuart Riddick, 30 years active in reserves in the Marine Corps, retiring as a colonel in the reserves in 1999 and served in Vietnam in 1972. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your service.
Thank you very much for having us this morning. I think some of the technical problems we just had was, we've always had that problem when we tried to get Stu on camera. He has that impact.
Go ahead, Stu. I'm waiting. Go ahead. We can't hear you. Can't hear you. Hold on a second. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. I got you.
I said, Jim is just jealous of that. I rank him and always will.
Oh, here we go. Okay, here we go. Okay, gentlemen. I know there's a lot of personal history between the 2 of you. Both of you served. You have personal stories. You have military stories. You guys are legends in your own right. Talk to me, Jim. I'll go to you first. Talk to me about the friendship that you and Stu have, because it's obvious to me you guys have known each other for years and there's this ongoing banter, but that's something very special that we need to consider as we are looking at our national defense today. Talk to me about how you 2 met and just the relationship there.
Well, it's been so many years, I've been trying to remember now. But it was after we had both served in Vietnam. When was it, Stu? In the 80s, 1980s?
Yeah, mid-80s, I think.
Yeah, and we were attached to the same unit, and Stu kind of looked at me as a role model.
Can you mute his microphone?
Sure, I can.
No, Stu was senior to me. He was commissioned about a year or 2 before me, and but despite that difference in longevity, we both seem to be cut from the same cloth as far as humor goes, and we really hit it off. So we remained very good friends for about 40 years now. So, I've really appreciated his friendship and occasionally some of his wisdom.
Okay, Stu, back to you on that one. I want to hear a little bit of your North Carolina accent. Let me put out there for everybody in Eastern North Carolina. You served at Camp Lejeune and you have a very North Carolinian accent. How's that?
I don't hear it, but when I hear myself on tape, I've got one. Jim and I knew Jim's brother Elmo at University of North Carolina, and I didn't know Jim then. Jim was a year behind us, and if I'd known Jim then, we'd still be trying to graduate. But as Jim said, we've sort of cut from the same cloth, and it's always good to be around him, even though his intellect is sometimes lagging.
Let me ask you both being Vietnam veterans and the 50th anniversary this year especially of the POWs. And I know there's a new book out called Unwavering, and it's all about the spouses who fought for their POWs. Talk to me a little bit about what does it mean to you now in this day and time, in this generation, of what we are seeing happen in our military, but thinking about the 50th anniversary, thinking about everything that you two have fought for the nation. Stu, go ahead and go first.
Well, I'm a little concerned at the way the military is going, especially the Marine Corps. As Jim well knows, the current commandant is cutting back on forces and equipment. There are no more tanks and fewer fighting Marines on the ground, and communist China is building up as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how we're going to be able to face a land war in Asia if it ever comes to that.
Do you go ahead, Jim? Your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting. It's the military has kind of had a cyclical track record. After the Cold War, we took away a lot of the funding for the military, and then soon afterwards we learned that wasn't a very good idea. Now we're giving priority to things that should not be prioritized. Social justice is fine, but for the military, we have one mission, and that's to win a conflict. And if you take anything away from that, you're not allowing the military to do its job. Right now, the Navy doesn't even have enough ships to transport Marines to a battle area. It's just very frustrating. And with all the challenges now facing us, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, we should be building up our resources, and we're not doing that. You pick up the paper and you're reading more about racial issues and social justice issues, and nothing about the fact that we're really shooting ourselves in the foot militarily.
So let me ask you this. I'm going to jump right in because rumor has it Governor Ron DeSantis from Florida is jumping in the race, the presidential race today. I'm hearing news headlines are stating it's today. And, you look at both sides of the aisle. You look at the current president in office, whoever that is. I'm still questioning if it's Obama or Biden. I'm going to be honest with you on that one. And so you have that. You have Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's come out and said he wants to run. You have former President Donald Trump, my former boss, coming out saying he is running. You have Nikki Haley, a former governor, a military spouse, a veteran spouse. I too am a veteran spouse, so I see that. You have Senator Tim Scott coming out saying he's running. But out of all of them, one is that had an active duty military record, and that's Governor Ron DeSantis. And I always say, whenever I'm looking for a presidential leader, I want them to have that military mentality, that commander-in-chief mentality. And I don't see that happening right now. Trump had that mentality, but are we looking for a leader like Ron DeSantis? And I'm not trying to say who you guys are going to go for or not for, but isn't that an utmost importance at this point? Because I feel like America is a sitting duck right now.
Well, if you take a look at America's track record, I think it's about 67% of our presidents have had some kind of military service. That says a lot. That shows that people have confidence in people who have served in the military. If you take a look at what's happening in the military today, the fact that Joe Biden had zero experience. In fact, he got 5 waivers in college to avoid the draft, yet was able to play athletics. I don't know how he was able to do that. But, what has become apparent to me, the White House just recently announced that they hope by the year 2035 to have all military vehicles electric driven.
I saw your article about that. How is that going to work?
That is absolutely asinine. I think back to Desert Storm. We were out in the middle of the desert and you aren't going to find many electric chargers out there in the middle of the desert. I just don't know what's going through his mind. And I would have thought that every senior military person would have jumped all over that and said, Mr. President, this is not a good idea. But there's been absolute silence. They're they're in fear of confronting him on stupid decisions.
Well, let me ask you this, Stu. Let me go to you on this one. So they're in fear, but is it more of our agencies like defense, like FBI, like CIA, they have been compromised? Is that where that is taking more precedent than combating what the current, I'm putting in air quotes, commander in chief is calling for?
Well, it's been said that the military is not a place for social experimentation, and it certainly seems to be that way now.
Mm-hmm.
The woke military is, to me, as Jim notes, it's very dangerous to the security of this country. I mean, we're more worried about pronouns and which bathroom to use and fighting our enemies, and preparing to fight our enemies.
I want to highlight something I noticed this past weekend. So the Blue Angels were here in Goldsboro at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, and they got canceled because of COVID. My husband and I had seen them about 7 years ago at Seymour Johnson. They were here at Cherry Point last year. And so we constantly follow them. And one thing my husband and I both noticed, it had nothing to do with them, but it had everything to do with the lack of crowd participation at this year's event. Now, granted, rain and the weather could have played a little bit of a role, but the point I'm getting to is the patriotism piece. Has this country gone so woke and indoctrinated in this cult-like mentality of hatred and lack of patriotism? Are we losing ground here? Are we losing ground where these continued air shows and these opportunities to go to the Memorial Day services and to celebrate our veterans and to have a Veterans Day parade, are they all going to be washed away because this social justice military is now taking over and people are just giving up? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm hoping that what we're seeing now, as far as not standing for the national anthem, not respecting the flag, is like COVID-19. It's a plague that's with us for a little while, but eventually will go away. Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting. Brittany Griner, who, during the basketball season, she would not come out for the national anthem or would not stand for the national anthem. She then goes to Russia. She finds herself in a Russian prison for several months. Now that she's back playing, she stands for the national anthem. She says it's changed her mind. And sadly, some people have to have a personal experience like that to realize it. Mm-hmm. There was I think it was in the 1870s, a U.S. senator made the comment. He said, it's my country, right or wrong. If right, that's good. If wrong, then we said it right. And if you cannot have the basic foundation of honoring your country and honoring your flag and honoring your national anthem, I don't see any other foundation that you can build that will join people together.
Mm-hmm. Stu, let me ask you this. How do you think we can reestablish that foundation?
I think a lot of it comes to education in the schools. And, what I'm reading about what our kids are being educated in is just unbelievable. There's you have the 1619 project, which totally distorts America's history. Historians have said it distorts it, yet it's been honored embarrassingly by our university, the University of North Carolina, that brought the author of that 1619 project on their staff and gave her seniority. There is such an effort, particularly among academians, to show, to beat their chest and say, I'm a social justice warrior, that they don't do the facts, they study the facts they should be studying before they start beating their chests.
Mm-hmm. Well, Stu, let me go to you on that. What are your thoughts? He cites education, and I completely agree with him because education has completely, it's a watered down American history. It's a watered down of everything, and more bathrooms and rape that's happening in Loudoun County schools. So what are your thoughts to that? How do we get that patriotism back?
Well, and in most universities these days, the conservative professors are not getting tenure. So, but it starts, as Jim says, way back in the elementary school and teaching patriotism and and history. I don't think they teach much American history in schools anymore.
No, they don't.
And that should be first and foremost.
Yes, agreed. Let's talk a little bit about both of your services during such a very, well, I'm just going to go off of what I learned from history and what my father and my grandfather and my husband has taught me about military history and the Vietnam War. My father did not serve, but here's why. My grandfather, a World War II veteran, contracted polio in the 1950s. No longer, and then after that, he was put in the iron lung. He was a quadriplegic. My father was the community of farmers in Pennsylvania wrote a letter to the officials, and I hope I'm getting this right. I know he's watching, and basically said, and my father wasn't trying to get out. He wanted to go serve, but he was my grandfather's caregiver. So he did not serve. He stayed home and served in a different way. But as I hear him talk about wishing he could have served, I should say, not would have, but could have. And I hear about the patriotism that comes from my husband and what he did and his time in Iraq. That patriotism, you guys are leaders for this next generation. So what would you tell our new high school graduates? What would you tell our new college graduates who have not been indoctrinated into the cult? What would you share with them about your personal journeys of being on the ground in Vietnam or your personal journeys of Desert Storm? What would you share with them? What are words of wisdom that you would impart to them?
I guess what I tell them is that if you look at our history, every time there's been a rough time, whether it was the American Revolution, War of 1812, so on and so forth, you always had a core of American patriots that rose to the challenge and met the challenge. And as a result, we really didn't lose a conflict until the Vietnam War. But that there was always that sense of pride in the back of the mind of every American citizen.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be rediscovered. And I think there's so much going on now for our young people, so many distractions that they really don't focus on the things they need to focus. And I guess what I tell them, I would challenge them to study American history on their own if they're not getting it in the classroom, and to know what got this country to where it is today, and to know that they now have an obligation to carry it through their generation and to preserve it for their children and grandchildren. I think every generation of American parents has sought to leave America a little better than what they inherited from their parents. And that has happened up until, sadly, I think my generation. I really worry about what we're leaving our kids and grandchildren.
Mm-hmm. And Stu, to you.
Well, I would tell graduating seniors to give the military a shot. I've never regretted joining up. When Jim and I were on active duty, it was there was a war on. The country needed us, and there we went. And that's what there's a few higher callings than serving in the U.S. military.
Mm-hmm.
I gave a graduation speech years ago at my high school down in North Carolina, and I told the seniors, go out and leave this community and this country in a better shape than you found it. And I think that was my advice to them, and I still believe it.
Stu, I didn't realize you graduated from high school.
There we go.
Turn his mic off again, please.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do that.
Okay. Eden, the thing interesting, you're talking about your father and how he wanted to serve, but couldn't.
Yes.
Compare that to our president, Joe Biden, who really could have served in the military, but got 5 deferments not to serve while he was able to play college sports. I mean, that to me shows somebody who has no interest in representing what this country is all about.
Yes, I agree. And you know what, Clinton, former President Clinton, I think, falls into that same category. Avoiding the draft, going to England, I believe. I may have that wrong. I was a young college freshman when all of that was going on. So let's talk about this. Jim, I want to talk about Stars and Stripes article that you had published. I believe it was last week. And I'm going to pull it up here really quickly. And a couple things really stood out to me. The Navy recruiting, Bud Light versus Bud Right. This is a great article. And I love how you refer to Zig Rams, which was obviously your father. But can you talk about the article? Can you kind of give the premise to it for our audience? And keep in mind, you got a lot of retirees tuning in and also active duty military families tuning in. So if you want, because I know a lot of them are furious over the whole Bud Light piece.
Well, basically, my father was Admiral Elmo R. Zumwalt Jr. He, at age 49, he was the youngest chief of naval operations in history and still is the youngest. But when he took command of the Navy had the lowest reenlistment rates in history. And it's interesting because today we have some extremely low enlistment rates and reenlistment rates. But the approaches taken by my father 50 some years ago and the approaches taken today are totally different. My father, when he became chief of naval operations, he set up study groups, and he brought into these study groups people who had already said that they were getting out, because he wanted to get honest feedback from them as to why they were getting out. But they identified numerous issues that were creating a negative environment in the Navy, and which was why they were getting out. So my father, after he got all this feedback, he then implemented over 100 changes in the Navy that were known as ZGRAMs. And in some cases, it was little things, like, for example, growing beards. My father his previous assignment had been commander of Naval Forces Vietnam. They had beards and mustaches and so forth, and were perfectly capable of doing their job. So he saw no reason why their counterparts back in the States shouldn't be allowed to do the same thing. They had a little thing like beer in the barracks. If you're responsible enough to fight, you're responsible enough to have beer in the barracks. There were things like racial issues. Some of the black people that were getting out said that the commissaries in PX did not have the kind of cosmetics that they needed for their skin and things of that nature. So a ZGRAM was set up for that. But he basically identified every problem that could exist in the Navy that was causing people to get out. And his term was 4 years. At the end of 4 years, he had tripled reenlistment rates. And what that meant for the Navy was, instead of having to bring in new recruits and spend money training them, that money could be spent for R&D and building other ships. Mm-hmm. And the reason I called it Bud Light versus Bud Right was I pointed out how the Navy today was using a similar Bud Light program and using a drag queen to attract people to join the Navy, which baffles me. I just don't know why in the world they would see that as a plus when you're basically appealing to less than 1% of the population. But my father's nickname was Bud, so I gave it the title of Bud Light versus Bud Bright.
You said less than 1% of the population, is interested in this drag queen agenda, and the transgender piece of it. And, so do you think the Navy has awakened to this woke indoctrination that is destroying this nation?
I don't really know. I haven't seen any sign that suggests that. I haven't seen anybody come out and say we made a mistake with this program. Like Bud Light has. Bud Light has taken some responsibility for their program, but I don't see anything happening on the military side. And what really concerns me is you have senior officers who are so blinded by Biden's leadership and what he wants to do, they don't want to hurt their own promotion chances by, doing what they should be doing. In that same article, I wrote that my father gave two principles that he followed when he was retiring. He had a lot of critics and supporters for his changes, and a interviewer asked him what he thought of his critics. My father said, "I know I have a long list of friends and a long list of enemies, and I'm proud of both lists." So basically, he said, it doesn't matter who they are. I did what I knew was right. And the other principle was he took on every assignment in the Navy from a junior officer all the way through his 4-star job as if it would be the last job he ever had in the Navy. And he said that caused him to do what was right. And, so he has no regrets about what he did. And the proof is in the pudding. He tripled re-enlistment rates. You're not going to see that with the campaign that today's Navy has undertaken.
Astute to you, the meaning of work, just exemplified right here, the meaning of service. So what do you say to the Marine Corps? And I'll give you a similar example. Being right here at Camp Lejeune, husband and I went over there to the commissary the other day. And again, it almost looked like a ghost town in many senses. And again, it was the weekend, but usually people are out commissary, shopping, going to the MX, shopping, getting stuff done. And we didn't see that. And we made the comment to one another, what is going on around here? And, I wouldn't use the word spooked, but I would say it resembled what we saw at Fort Bragg when we were there last summer. What are your thoughts to the recruitment for the Marine Corps?
Well, in terms of numbers, the Commandant has continued to, cut numbers. There are no more tanks, no more self-propelled artillery. Whole MOSs are being wiped out of the Marine Corps, and to the consternation of, correct thinking veterans, including most retired Marine generals.
Yeah.
I don't know what the Marine recruiting numbers are, but if they're similar to other services, they're dropping. As Jim notes, the recruiting is not geared for steady recruitment. Having drag queens recruiting commercials, I can't see that happening in the Marine Corps, but they're reaching the wrong audience.
Yeah, they are. I think they need some new public relations communications people.
Yeah, they need to have a book about that.
One other point I make in that Stars and Stripes article I wrote, their focus was entirely wrong. As I said, you're talking about less than 1% of the population. Mm-hmm. The thing that holds the military together, and especially the Marine Corps, is what I call the Three Musketeers mindset. Mm-hmm. And that's one for all for one. Mm-hmm. And that's what you need to be focusing on. You need to show that this is an opportunity to bond with others who are also willing to put their life at risk. You know, who cares if there's some guy who wants to dress up like a woman? I mean, that has zero impact on recruiting.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Let me ask you guys about this. So my husband and I mentor teenagers. We have godsons who absolutely adore and love military history. I've learned more from them, and I'm just so proud of them. But what do we, let me ask you about the VFWs and the American Legions. And I'd mentioned on my show, I believe it was earlier this week, to, the next generation, if you are looking to really learn and engage, go to a VFW, go to American Legion. Are there other groups that our next generation can go and volunteer and get involved with and just be around veterans like you who have served and you have such wisdom, discernment, resilience? What can you say? What are opportunities out there that you know of would be good for the next generation?
Well, I think you make a good point about the VA organizations. I live outside of Sarasota, Florida, and there's a group that gets together once a month of veterans from all services. People don't come and immediately spill their hearts out, but you get to establish a relationship with these guys, and it's easy to do because you all have come from that same patriotic building block. And then once you get to know the people a little better, then you can open up about things that are bothering you or things going on in the country that you don't quite agree with. And you do learn quite a bit from these people who have had their own experiences. I really treasure the opportunity.
What about you, Stuart?
Well, I suggested, in addition to the service organizations, for people to take off one weekend and visit a VA hospital and visit vets in the hospital. And there's some amazing people in there. They have some amazing stories. You couldn't help to be
inspired,
uplifted. Yeah. Talking to these guys, ladies and gentlemen over there.
That's a great suggestion. I'll tell you a little personal story about myself. Right after 9/11, I was serving on Senator Santorum's team, the Senate Republican Conference in Capitol Hill. And we were tasked to go over to Walter Reed and start setting up things for the families, because men especially were coming home in all kinds of ways. And there wasn't really much set aside for these men who were serving. And one of the biggest impacts it made on me was I just took off. I would go on the weekends. I went over on Memorial Day, and I just sat with their families and the service members and got to hear their stories and just hear about them. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about my career. It wasn't about the ladders. It was focusing on them and loving on them and their families. And, I got to meet, I know a lot of people aren't fond of Rumsfeld, but Rumsfeld snuck in one Memorial Day when I was sitting there with the soldier and his family, and nobody knew he was coming. He just popped over and he wanted to come over and shake hands with all of those who are at Walter Reed. And that impacted me to this day. So I love your idea, Stuart, having the next generation go in and volunteer and serve in different veteran hospitals or veteran locations, I think is a phenomenal idea. Jim, what are any other suggestions on your side? I know you said you're in Sarasota, so I know there's a lot down there by you as well.
Right. The only other comment I'd make is you ought to make note of this date, because that's the first time Stu has had a good idea in years.
Oh my goodness, you two are hysterical. Okay, talk to me about what you are doing this Memorial Day holiday. What are you doing do you have traditions that you have set over time, or is it more of a private holiday for you? What message would you send out to Americans this Memorial Day?
Well, we'll be having burgers at my daughter's house in Annandale. I celebrate Memorial Day in a private way.
Yeah.
I'll be remembering guys who are no longer with us.
Mm-hmm.
Two teammates of mine in high school on the high school baseball team were killed in action in Vietnam. I remember those guys. And 50-some thousand more like them.
Yeah.
Look,
And what, Jim, for you?
growing up, I always knew what Memorial Day was, and I appreciated it. But it wasn't until the Vietnam War, and I lost friends. I lost a brother that it had renewed meaning to me. I always say a prayer for my brother. I was thinking the other day that I've almost lived half my life now without him. Which that's a shocking realization. But I do miss him. He was my role model, and it took me several years after I lost him to get over the anger of that loss.
Mm-hmm. And Jim, you talk about that in some of your books. Is that correct?
Right. In 1992, my father, who was retired at the time, and my brother had died of Agent Orange exposure. My father wanted to get the Vietnamese government's permission to do a joint study on Agent Orange. And so he was going over to Vietnam. He asked me if I wanted to go with him. And I had so much anger, I decided not to initially, but I ended up going with him. We were there for a week. Every day we were meeting with people who we had fought on the other side of the battlefield. And I felt the anger welling up inside me until the third day. I had a one-on-one meeting with the Major General in the North Vietnamese, who served in the North Vietnamese Army. And he started the meeting by extending his condolences for the loss of my brother. And as we talked about the war and its impact, he got a little teary-eyed. And I later learned that he too had lost a brother. And at least I was with my brother when he died. I knew how he died. I knew the disposition of the body. The general spent 17 years looking for his brother's remains because in the Vietnamese culture, it's very important to bring the body back to the village of birth to continue the cycle of life. But, when he shared that with me, it was kind of like a light went on, and I asked myself, was it any more difficult for us than it was for them? And, the answer was obvious. They had suffered just as much as we had. And that's what caused me to make over 50 trips back to Vietnam to interview their veterans. And I interviewed several hundred of their veterans and got their input from what it was like to fight the war on their side of the battlefield, and ultimately wrote a book about that I published in 2009. And interestingly, now I have several former NVA who are friends. I've attended the college graduations of their grandchildren here in the U.S. I'm at a much better place now than I was years ago.
Mm-hmm. And what's the title of that book for anybody who's interested in going and ordering it? And I know it's still available, correct?
Yes, it's available on Amazon.com. But it's Bare Feet, Iron Will, Stories from the Other Side of Vietnam's Battlefields.
Did you, after writing that book, did you find more Agent Orange stories and stories that were coming up at that point?
Well, there's a heck of a lot of Agent Orange stories from over there. They have several of the NVA that I consider friends have passed because of Agent Orange exposure.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that's interesting is Vietnam claims every malady over there is caused by Agent Orange. Initially, we said none were being created by Agent Orange. My father did a pro bono report for the VA in which he said that at least 24 maladies were related to Agent Orange exposure. And the other thing he pointed out was the VA medical board that was reviewing the evidence every 3 years to see if there was a correlation was comprised mostly of doctors who worked for the very chemical companies that had manufactured Agent Orange. So he recommended that they be disbanded and a totally independent board be set up. Today, at least 15 of those 24 cancers and so forth have been recognized by the VA.
Mhm.
So it was amazing. My father, with no medical background, was able to
Yeah.
show that their exposure was responsible.
That is a segment I want to do just alone with you when we have more time to really dig into Agent Orange. To the both of you, my husband and I live in a retirement community, and we know of veterans who are dealing with Agent Orange. And we've seen them decline dramatically in a very short period of time. So that's something that is very important to us to better understand, especially being in this Marine Corps, Navy, and a little bit of Army retirement community, if you will. On a final note, we are about to wrap here at Common Sense America. And Stuart Riddick and Jim Zumwalt, any final words for the active duty military families here at Camp Lejeune, Cherry Point, New River, the Coast Guard Station, Fort Bragg? Any final words to our active duty and their families for today?
Well, I'd say God bless them. They put up with so much for so little. Tell them to hang in. Better days are coming.
Well said.
I know that there are still some out there who are having issues, and I would strongly encourage them to take a journey, like the journey I took in Vietnam. I know I've spoken to a number of these veterans who are reluctant to go back to Vietnam, but I think if they went back to Vietnam, they would be amazed with what they saw. I was worried at first how I would be received. I was received very well, and the fact is they look at the war with America as a mistake of history, and they admire the United States, they admire Americans, they embrace them. Their real concern is China, and they're inviting us back in to take over some of the ports that they kicked us out of a century earlier. So I think that is a very rewarding journey to take if they're still suffering from aspects of the Vietnam War.
I ditto that. I've been back several times, not as many as Jim, but the friendliest people are up north around Hanoi. I made friends with several senior North Vietnamese veterans, and one of them, his daughter graduated from Ohio State. She's now an architect up in Michigan. And, it's worth a trip back. Like Jim, I've done several veterans who don't want to go back. They need to.
When I was there during the war, the highest building was probably the Continental Hotel in Saigon, which was about 12 stories high. Now they've got a 100-story building in Saigon. They've got a circumferential around the city. They've opened up to the west, and they've enjoyed some very good expansions as a result of it. So I think people who served and went back over would realize that it was not all for naught.
Right. Yeah. It sounds as though the closure piece is such a huge piece to this aspect of the Vietnam War, especially for the both of you, but for others who, like you said, may not have done so. And I'm just honored to have both of you here. I've been told by many veterans, don't thank us for your don't say thank you for your service. But I was raised in a different home like that. My father taught us to do that. My husband, he's taught me so much, being a veteran spouse. So I thank you both for what you have done. I thank you for inspiring myself, inspiring the next generation, and perhaps the audience who tuned in today, you have inspired them as well, especially our military families. So thank you both so much for being here today.
Eden, if I could just make one last request, if we do another interview, please don't include Stu. Okay?
You know what? We're going to include Stu and your other friends too. We're going to bombard you, Jim. We're going to have a blast.
I'll be a nice guy and endorse Jim's book, Bare Feet, Iron Will. It's a good read. He made me pay retail for it, but it's a good read.
Well, I look forward to having you both back. And, as I think about the summer, apple pie holidays, patriotic holidays, Veterans Day, what we have ahead, I would love to have you guys back to talk about those things. But also, our national defense is so important to me here in Eastern North Carolina and across the country. So I know that you both can impart wisdom to this nation.
And we thank you for what you do. It's important to have this kind of education given to the people.
Oh, thank you, Jim. Thank you,
Keep plugging away.
Thank you, sir. You guys have a great weekend. I will be in touch. We have more great things coming to you. So you guys have a wonderful weekend. Be safe and many blessings to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye. And for all of those who are tuning in here at Common Sense America, what a powerful segment. Again, I wanted to apologize for the technical difficulties we had starting off, but you know what? I am just so thankful for the amazing service of Lieutenant Colonel James Zumwalt and also Stuart Riddick, serving years in Vietnam and the Marine Corps, both of them. They sent me amazing pictures of their service and their time in the Marine Corps. And, I'm just going to throw those up here. We have just a few minutes left here at Common Sense America. And I'm just going to put on a little bit of music just to remember and honor those this Memorial Day. So thank you to all of you who are supporting Common Sense America. Please subscribe to Common Sense America with Eden Hill on YouTube. We have so much more coming to you for the rest of this week, tomorrow and Friday, 2 full segments. So excited to introduce new people and returning guests to the show. And then also we will have all next week, all new segments. And so if you have not done so yet, please go pick up a copy of Jim's book. If you go to Amazon.com and just Google James Zumwalt, you will see all the books that he has written and his historical career. So we will be right back. We're going to take a quick break. And to all of those who tuned in today for this Common Sense America special Memorial Day edition with two very powerful Vietnam veterans, thank you so much for supporting Common Sense America. Thanks to all of you who send me notes daily. You send me so many inspiring text messages, private messages. Thank you so much. Thank you to my friends at TNT Radio who are such a support to this show. Thank you also to many other radio stations who have just inspired me. WABC, 990 AM Philadelphia, WMAL DC. You all are such an inspiration with your conservative truth that you bring to radio. So thank you so much. I applaud you and I appreciate what you have done and inspiring me to bring this show of truth, of God, country, and family here to Common Sense America, here in Eastern North Carolina. But have no fear, ladies and gentlemen. This show is just not in North Carolina. I, again, am seeing high numbers. New York City, we also see high numbers in other areas of the country. Pennsylvania, as you can tell, where I'm originally from. But now we have Hubert, we have Swansboro, we have Cedar Point, we have Morehead City, and we have New York City, and we have Pennsylvania. So thanks to each and every one of you. We will be right back here tomorrow with Melanie Collette kicking us off at 9:05 a.m. Eastern Time. And then halfway through, Gun Right Advocate, we have Victoria Churchill with American Liberty News. She'll be joining us at 9:35. All things politics, ladies and gentlemen. And I have a feeling we'll be talking about the new announcements that are happening today in the presidential races. And then on Friday, we have another couple new guests that were from NRB and the amazing NRB conference and all of the wonderful guests that have been coming to us. So for such a time as this, put on the full armor of God. We have a lot to do. Let's get to work, people. I will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you again for joining Common Sense America.
It's time for Common Sense.